"That badge may open doors, Officer Whitaker," Naomi Brooks said, her voice low enough to make the hallway lean in. "But it will not bury the truth today." For half a second, the courthouse went still around her. The marble corridor outside courtroom 4B carried the usual morning sounds of downtown Chicago justice. Shoes tapping against polished floors, metal detectors humming near the entrance, attorneys whispering into phones, families clutching folders as if paper could hold their lives together. But near the tall oak doors, everything seemed to tighten around the man in the Navy police uniform and the black woman standing in front of him with a worn leather briefcase at her side. Officer Daniel Whitaker smiled like he had heard something amusing from someone who had forgotten her place. He was 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, his silver badge pinned so neatly to his chest that it caught the fluorescent light every time he breathed. Slowly, almost casually, he touched it with 2 fingers, then looked Naomi up and down, not with curiosity, not even with anger, but with the cold patience of a man used to being believed before he ever opened his mouth. "Counselor," he said, making the title sound like an insult. "This little piece of metal has ended careers bigger than yours." Naomi did not move. She could smell the bitter coffee from a paper cup on the windowsill, the old wood of the courtroom doors, the faint rain dampness still clinging to coats from the morning drizzle outside. Behind her, Marcus Reed sat on a bench with his mother, his hands folded so tightly that his knuckles had gone pale. He was 22 years old, a community college student, a warehouse worker, a son who still texted his mother when he got home late. On paper, he was now something else, a defendant accused of attacking a police officer during a traffic stop on the South Side. And on the front page of one local website, before any jury had heard a word, he had already been called dangerous. Whitaker leaned closer, careful not to raise his voice. "Don't try turning my courtroom into a speech about race," he murmured. "People like your client always think a sad story can erase what they did." The words landed softly, but Marcus heard them. His mother heard them. Naomi heard something older underneath them, something that had followed her since childhood through flashing lights, sealed reports, and the sound of her father's name being spoken like a warning instead of a man. She looked at Whitaker's badge again, and for one strange moment, the courthouse hallway disappeared. She saw a grainy photograph from 18 years ago, a younger officer half-turned beside a patrol car, the same hard mouth, the same proud tilt of the chin, standing near the arrest file that had helped send her father, Isaiah Brooks, into a prison cell he never came home from. Her fingers tightened once around the handle of her briefcase, then relaxed. She had not come here for revenge. She had come for Marcus. She had come for the truth. The courtroom doors opened with a heavy wooden sigh. A bailiff stepped out and called the case. People rose from the benches, papers rustled, whispers died. Whitaker gave Naomi one last smile, polished and empty. "Good luck in there," he said. "You're going to need it." Naomi stepped past him without answering. Inside, the courtroom was cool and bright, all dark wood, high windows, and the American flag standing motionless beside the judge's bench. The jury box waited. The witness chair waited. The seal of the court shone above the room like an eye that had seen too much and remembered too little. Naomi walked to the defense table, set down her briefcase, and opened it with quiet care. Marcus looked at her, trying to hide the fear in his face. "Ms. Brooks," he whispered, "do they ever listen?" Naomi looked toward the witness chair where Officer Whitaker would soon sit beneath oath, beneath light, beneath the weight of every word he had rehearsed. Then she turned back to Marcus and gave a small nod. "They will today," she said. And as the judge entered, as the room stood, as Daniel Whitaker adjusted his badge like armor, Naomi slid one sealed evidence bag from her file and placed it on the table. Inside was a cracked piece of phone glass, no bigger than a quarter, catching the courtroom light like a tiny, stubborn star. Judge Evelyn Hart entered with a calm that made every chair settle and every whisper disappear. Naomi rose with the rest of the courtroom, but her eyes stayed forward, fixed on the bench, not on the officer behind the prosecution table, not on the reporters near the back row, not on the mother beside Marcus Reed, who was praying without moving her lips. The air smelled faintly of paper, raincoats, and floor polish, the kind of courthouse smell that seemed to belong to every city in America. When everyone sat, Marcus lowered himself carefully into the chair beside Naomi as if one wrong sound might turn the room against him. He wore a navy button-down shirt his mother had ironed twice that morning. His tie was a little crooked. Naomi had noticed it before the hearing started and fixed it without saying a word, the same way her mother used to straighten her father's collar before he left for work at the repair shop. Marcus was not a hardened criminal. He was a young man who stocked freight at night, took business classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and kept a photograph of his younger sister inside his wallet because she said it brought good luck. But the system had a way of sanding down a person until only the accusation remained. To the police report, Marcus was aggressive. To the headline, he was a suspect. To Officer Daniel Whitaker, he was a lesson waiting to be taught. Naomi knew that language too well. She had first learned it at 11 years old, standing barefoot in the hallway of a small apartment on the west side while her mother held a phone with both hands and kept saying, "There must be a mistake." Her father, Isaiah Brooks, had been a mechanic with grease under his nails and gospel music in his truck. He measured life in small, honest things: a full tank of gas, a paid electric bill, a Sunday dinner that stretched into Monday leftovers. Then one night, a police report turned him into a threat. A witness statement disappeared. A camera at a gas station was said to be broken. A badge carried more weight than his name. Naomi still remembered visiting him through thick glass. How he smiled as if he were the one comforting her. How he pressed his palm to the barrier and told her, "Baby girl, do not let bitterness raise you." He died before the truth could catch up. Years later, a judge signed a paper that cleared him, but paper could not sit at the dinner table, could not laugh at old stories, could not walk Naomi across a graduation stage. So Naomi became the kind of lawyer who read every timestamp twice. She trusted small details because small details were often where buried people tried to speak. That was why the cracked phone glass mattered. That was why Marcus mattered. Across the room, Whitaker sat straight-backed, his uniform crisp, his expression controlled. He had the comfort of a man surrounded by familiar walls. The prosecutor leaned toward him and whispered something. Whitaker nodded once, then glanced at Naomi with a look that said he expected the morning to be easy. Naomi opened her folder and touched the first page of her notes. No speech, no outrage, just sequence. At 9:15 p.m., traffic stop initiated. At 9:17, backup requested. At 9:19, Marcus's phone stopped recording. At 9:23, the report claimed Marcus lunged. Naomi traced the timeline with her fingertip, feeling the quiet rhythm of truth beneath the paper. Judge Hart adjusted her glasses and looked over the courtroom. "We are here on the matter of State versus Marcus Reed," she said. Her voice was even, almost soft, but it carried to the farthest bench. Marcus swallowed hard. His mother reached forward and touched the back of his chair, just once. Naomi leaned closer to him without taking her eyes off the judge. "Breathe," she whispered. "You are not what they wrote." Marcus nodded, but his shoulders still trembled under the fabric of his shirt. The clerk began reading the charge, each word clean and official, each sentence placing more weight onto the room. Naomi listened until the last syllable faded. Then she looked toward the witness chair, empty for now, polished by years of testimony, waiting for Officer Whitaker to step into the light and tell a story he believed no one in that room had the power to break. Officer Daniel Whitaker took the witness chair like it had been built for him. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and settled back with the calm confidence of a man who had worn the same uniform long enough to mistake habit for honor. The courtroom watched him become official. His name entered the record. His badge number entered the record. His years of service entered the record. 21 years with the Chicago Police Department. 3 commendations. 2 community safety awards. A framed photograph with the mayor once printed in the local paper. The prosecutor, Assistant State Attorney Paul Brenner, walked him gently through the story, one polished step at a time. A routine traffic stop. A vehicle matching a description. A driver who became verbally hostile. A lawful request. A sudden escalation. Whitaker spoke in smooth, measured sentences, never too emotional, never too cold, just steady enough to sound practiced and honest to anyone who did not know what rehearsed control felt like. Naomi sat still, pen resting between her fingers, eyes lowered to her notes. She did not interrupt when Whitaker described Marcus as agitated. She did not react when he said Marcus refused repeated instructions. She did not look at the jury when he claimed he feared the situation was becoming dangerous. Marcus shifted beside her, hurt flashing across his face, but Naomi touched the edge of his sleeve under the table, a small signal to stay anchored. Across the aisle, Whitaker continued. He said Marcus reached toward his pocket. He said the phone was not visible. He said the street was poorly lit. He said he made every decision by the book. Each phrase landed in the room with the weight of policy language, clean enough to hide the person underneath it. Judge Hart listened without expression, her hands folded near the bench microphone. The jurors watched the officer with mixed faces, some sympathetic, some unreadable, one older man nodding faintly every few seconds as if years of television crime shows had already taught him which voices sounded trustworthy. Naomi noticed everything. She noticed Brenner never asked about the body camera until the very end. She noticed Whitaker's jaw tighten before answering. She noticed the way his thumb rubbed the side of his wedding ring, even though public records showed his divorce had been finalized 7 months earlier. Was your body camera active during the stop? Brenner asked. Whitaker paused just long enough for Naomi to hear the air change. It malfunctioned during the encounter, he said. I reported that immediately afterward. Brenner nodded as if that settled the matter. And is your written report accurate, to the best of your knowledge? Absolutely, Whitaker replied. He turned slightly toward the jury when he said it, giving them the full calm of his face. I stand by every word. The prosecutor sat down. For a moment, no one moved. Rain ticked softly against the high windows, thin and steady, like fingernails on glass. Naomi closed her folder, then opened a different one. The sound was quiet, but Whitaker's eyes flicked toward it. Judge Hart looked down at her. Cross-examination, Ms. Brooks? Naomi rose. She did not rush to the podium. She carried only 3 pages, a pen, and the sealed evidence bag holding the cracked phone glass. Her heels made a measured sound against the floor, not loud, not soft, just certain. When she reached the center of the courtroom, she looked at Whitaker for the first time since he had taken the oath. Officer Whitaker, she said, you testified that the street was poorly lit. That is correct. But you also testified that you clearly saw Mr. Reed reach toward his pocket. Yes. From approximately how far away? Whitaker gave a small smile. 6 to 8 feet. Naomi nodded. 6 to 8 feet, in poor lighting, during what you described as a rapidly escalating situation. That is my testimony. She let the answer sit. Then she placed 1 page on the display table. And yet you were able to identify a hand movement, assign intent to it, decide it was threatening, and write that conclusion into your report. Brenner stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Hart said. Naomi inclined her head. I will rephrase. She turned back to Whitaker, her voice still calm. Officer, did you see a weapon? No. Did you recover a weapon? No. Did Mr. Reed have any outstanding warrants? No. Did he attempt to flee? Whitaker's smile faded a fraction. No. Naomi nodded once, as if each answer were a small stone being placed exactly where it belonged. Then she lifted the evidence bag into the light. The cracked glass flashed briefly, and Marcus stopped breathing for half a second. Officer Whitaker, Naomi said, when you wrote your report, why did you leave out the phone? For the first time that morning, Officer Daniel Whitaker did not answer immediately. The evidence bag hung between him and Naomi Brooks, thin plastic catching the courtroom light, the broken glass inside no larger than a quarter but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Whitaker looked at it, then at Naomi, then toward Assistant State Attorney Brenner, whose expression had gone carefully blank. I did not include the phone because it was not relevant to the charge, Whitaker said at last. Naomi nodded slowly, as if she had expected the answer and had already built the next step around it. Not relevant, she repeated. Mr. Reed called emergency services from that phone at 9:15 p.m., correct? Whitaker shifted slightly in the witness chair. I would need to review the call log. Naomi turned 1 page over on the display table. Let us review it together. The screen beside the jury box lit up with a clean white document, a certified emergency call record from the city dispatch center. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The call began at 9:15 and 42 seconds. The caller identified himself as Marcus Reed. He said he had been stopped by an officer and wanted the interaction recorded. Does that refresh your memory? Whitaker's jaw moved once. People say many things during traffic stops. That was not my question. Judge Hart looked over her glasses. Answer the question, officer. Whitaker inhaled through his nose. Yes, it refreshes my memory. Naomi clicked once. A transcript appeared beneath the call record. The words were plain, almost painfully simple. I am not resisting. I am recording this. My hands are visible. Naomi let the jury read them in silence. Marcus stared at the screen as though hearing his own fear from across a canyon. His mother pressed a folded tissue to her mouth. Officer Whitaker, Naomi said, you testified that Mr. Reed reached toward his pocket. But according to this call, his hands were visible at the time he spoke with dispatch. Did you hear him say that? I was focused on officer safety. Did you hear him say that? The officer's badge reflected a hard strip of light. Yes. Naomi walked back to the table and lifted the evidence bag again. And this piece of glass came from the phone that stopped transmitting at 9:19 p.m. It was recovered from the curb, 18 feet from where your report says Mr. Reed was standing when he allegedly became aggressive. Brenner stood. Objection. Foundation. Naomi did not look away from Whitaker. The evidence technician is available, Your Honor, and the chain of custody has been stipulated by the state. Judge Hart glanced at Brenner. His shoulders lowered a fraction. Overruled. A small sound moved through the back row, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper. Whitaker heard it. Naomi saw him hear it. Control was leaving him in inches. Officer, Naomi continued, your report says the phone was secured during the arrest. That was my understanding. Your understanding, or your statement? My statement. So when you signed that report, you told this court, this jury, and the state that Mr. Reed's phone was secured during the arrest. Yes. Naomi turned toward the screen again. A photograph appeared. The curb outside a laundromat on South Kedzie Avenue. Wet pavement shining under a street lamp. A small scatter of glass near a storm drain. The timestamp glowed in the lower corner. 9:21 p.m. 2 minutes before Whitaker claimed the phone had been secured. Naomi let the image breathe. The courthouse seemed to shrink around it. This photograph was taken by a laundromat owner named Mrs. Elena Park, Naomi said. She heard the emergency call still connected through the speaker after the phone landed near her doorway. She picked it up, saw that the screen was broken, and took this picture before handing it to responding officers. Whitaker's face remained composed, but the color beneath his skin had changed. I do not know anything about that photograph. Naomi stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance from the witness stand. That is interesting, officer, because Mrs. Park also kept something else. She clicked again. The screen went black for a second. Then a frozen video frame appeared, grainy but clear enough. A patrol car, a young man standing with his hands raised, and Officer Whitaker facing him under the pale wash of a laundromat security light. Marcus made a sound beside Naomi, small and broken with recognition. Naomi did not turn around. She kept her eyes on Whitaker. You told this courtroom the street was too dark to see clearly, she said. But the laundromat across the street saw everything. The video frame remained frozen on the screen, and in that frozen second, the power inside the courtroom changed direction. Officer Daniel Whitaker looked at the image as if it had no right to exist. His uniform was still perfect, his posture still straight, his badge still bright, but the room no longer belonged to him. Naomi Brooks stood between the jury and the witness stand, one hand resting near the evidence table, her face calm enough to make his discomfort louder. Your Honor, Assistant State Attorney Brenner said quickly, rising from his chair, the state has not had adequate time to review this footage. Judge Hart did not look pleased. Mr. Brenner, this footage was disclosed yesterday afternoon according to the filing record. Brenner's mouth tightened. I understand that, Your Honor, but its interpretation is disputed. Naomi turned slightly. Then let the courtroom see what is being disputed. A hush fell so completely that the rain against the windows seemed to move closer. Judge Hart nodded once. Proceed. Naomi pressed play. The video had no dramatic music, no clean television angle, no perfect sound. It was just a grainy security recording from a small 24-hour laundromat, filmed from above the front window, looking across a wet Chicago street. Headlights passed in pale streaks. A bus rolled by in the far lane. Then Marcus Reed appeared near the patrol car, both hands lifted, his body angled toward the officer. Even through the blurred pixels, his posture was clear, still, cautious, trying not to make himself look dangerous. Naomi let the video run for 4 seconds, then paused. Officer Whitaker, are these Mr. Reed's hands? Whitaker's eyes stayed on the screen. It appears so. Are they visible? In that frame, yes. Are they near his pocket? Whitaker hesitated. Not in that frame. Naomi clicked forward. The next sequence showed Marcus turning his head toward the glowing phone on the curb. The phone screen flickered. The emergency call was still active. Whitaker stepped partially into view, his body blocking part of the camera for a moment. Then Marcus lowered one hand slightly, not toward his pocket, but toward the phone. Naomi paused again before the movement completed. You testified that Mr. Reed reached in a way that made you fear for your safety, she said. Is this the movement you described? Whitaker's face hardened. Video can be misleading without context. Then give us the context. The officer shifted. The leather of the witness chair gave a small sound beneath him. The stop was tense. He was not complying the way I needed him to comply. Naomi nodded. Not complying, or not submitting to a version of the story you wanted written before it happened? Brenner shot to his feet. Objection. Sustained, Judge Hart said sharply. Ms. Brooks, keep to questions. Naomi lowered her chin. Yes, Your Honor. She turned back to Whitaker. Officer, in your report, did you write that Mr. Reed was recording the encounter? No. Did you write that he called emergency services to document the stop? No. Did you write that a business camera faced the street from across the road? I was not aware of the camera. But you were aware of the laundromat. Whitaker blinked. It was across the street. With its lights on. Yes. With its front window facing your patrol car. He did not answer at once. Naomi waited. The judge waited. The jury waited. Yes, he said finally. Something passed through the courtroom then, a quiet recognition moving from face to face. It was not outrage yet. It was the moment before outrage, when people begin measuring the distance between what they were told and what they can. Now see. Marcus sat frozen beside the defense table, his eyes wet but wide open, as if he were afraid that blinking would make the proof disappear. His mother's hand rested over her heart. Naomi felt the room turning, but she did not chase the turn. She knew better. A lawyer could lose truth by holding it too tightly. She clicked again, and the video advanced. This time the screen showed Whitaker leaning toward Marcus, pointing toward the patrol car, while Marcus kept one hand raised and the other extended toward the phone on the ground. No sudden rush. No wild motion. No threat the camera could see. Whitaker's voice, captured faintly through the phone's speaker, crackled into the courtroom, low and sharp beneath the static. You people always make this harder than it has to be. The words hung there, stripped of hallway courage, stripped of uniformed confidence, stripped of every excuse that needed darkness to survive. Brenner closed his eyes for half a second. Judge Hart's expression went cold. In the jury box, the older man who had been nodding earlier stopped moving completely. Naomi did not look triumphant. Her hand remained steady on the remote, but inside her chest, something old and wounded had gone very still. She thought of her father behind glass, telling her not to let bitterness raise her. She thought of Marcus trying to be careful with his own breathing on a wet street while a badge decided what kind of man he would become on paper. Whitaker cleared his throat. That phrase was not racial, he said. His voice had lost some of its polish. It is a common expression used in stressful situations. Naomi looked at him then, directly, fully. Officer Whitaker, when you said people like him, what people did you mean? The courtroom did not breathe. Whitaker opened his mouth, but nothing came out clean. For the first time all morning, the man who had walked in protected by certainty had to search for an answer under oath. The silence after Naomi's question was different from every silence before it. It was not confusion, not formality, not the ordinary pause of a courtroom waiting for procedure to catch up. It was the sound of a wall discovering a crack. Officer Daniel Whitaker sat beneath the witness light with his mouth slightly open, searching for a sentence that could make the words on that recording smaller than they were. I meant people who resist, he said finally. His voice came out flatter than before. Naomi did not move. People who resist, she repeated, even though the video shows Mr. Reed standing still. Whitaker swallowed. Standing still does not always mean compliant. The answer drifted across the room and landed badly. Marcus lowered his eyes, not in shame this time, but because the effort of staying composed had become almost physical. His mother reached for the wooden rail in front of her, fingers pressing into the polished edge. Judge Hart made a note with a slow, deliberate stroke of her pen. Naomi looked down at the evidence bag on the table. The piece of phone glass caught the light again, a tiny flash against the dark wood, and for a moment she was no longer in courtroom 4B. She was 11 years old, watching her mother place Isaiah Brooks's eyeglasses into a shoebox after the prison sent back his things. One lens had a crack running through it, thin and crooked, splitting the world into two versions, the one people believed and the one that had actually happened. Her father had once fixed engines by sound alone. He could hear a bad belt, a tired starter, a loose valve before anyone else knew something was wrong. But when he tried to tell the truth about the night he was arrested, nobody listened closely enough to hear him. The report had sounded cleaner. The badge had sounded louder. Naomi blinked once, and the courtroom returned. The flag, the jury, the witness stand, the rain drawing faint lines down the high windows. She could feel every eye on her, waiting to see if she would break, if anger would rise in her throat and give Whitaker a way to call her emotional, unstable, unprofessional. She gave him nothing. She gave the room only breath. One slow breath in, one slow breath out. Then she turned to Marcus. He looked up, and she nodded almost invisibly. Not yet victory. Just hold on. If this moment touched your heart, remember Naomi, because sometimes courage is not a shout, not a fist, not a speech. Sometimes courage is a black woman standing still in a room built to doubt her, refusing to let pain make her careless. Naomi faced the bench again. Your Honor, may I have a brief moment to confer with my client before continuing? Judge Hart studied her for a second, perhaps seeing the tremor Naomi had refused to show anywhere else. You may, she said. Naomi returned to the defense table and leaned close to Marcus, keeping her voice low. You are doing well. Marcus let out a breath that shook. He made me sound like I was not even human. Naomi's eyes softened. That is why we answer with proof. What if proof is not enough? He whispered. The question was so quiet that only she could hear it, but it carried years inside it. Naomi looked at his hands, young hands, tired hands, hands that had been described as dangerous simply because an officer needed them to be. She thought of her father's palm pressed to prison glass. She thought of how truth can arrive too late and still deserve a chair at the table. Then we keep bringing more, she said. Across the aisle, Whitaker shifted again. The movement made his badge glint against his chest, bright, cold, almost impatient. Naomi returned to the center of the courtroom. Her face had settled into something clear and steady. The grief was still there, but it had become focus. The anger was still there, but it had become discipline. She picked up the remote and rewound the video by 6 seconds. The faint voice from the recording filled the room again. You people always make this harder than it has to be. This time, Naomi did not ask him what he meant. She let the words stand alone. Then she paused the video on Marcus's raised hands and turned to the judge. Your Honor, she said, the defense requests permission to call an additional witness whose testimony directly concerns this officer's pattern of omitted evidence. Brenner stood so fast his chair gave a soft scrape. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of this hearing. Judge Hart's eyes narrowed. Who was the witness, Ms. Brooks? Naomi did not look at Whitaker, but she felt the room tilt toward him. Clara Whitaker, she said. The officer's face changed before he could stop it. Not anger, not confusion, recognition. And in that single flicker, the courtroom understood there was another door in this story, and Naomi had just opened it. The name Clara Whitaker moved through the courtroom like a draft under a locked door. Officer Daniel Whitaker's face changed for less than a second, but Naomi saw it clearly. So did Judge Hart. So did at least 3 jurors who leaned forward without meaning to. Assistant State Attorney Brenner looked down at his file as if the witness list might rearrange itself into something safer. Your Honor, he said, his voice tight. The state objects to surprise testimony that appears designed to prejudice the court against a decorated officer. Judge Hart's gaze did not leave Naomi. Ms. Brooks, explain relevance. Naomi stood with both hands resting lightly on the defense table. Mrs. Whitaker contacted my office after reviewing the publicly filed motion regarding omitted recording evidence. She possesses material directly related to Officer Whitaker's documentation practices, including files he maintained outside official department channels. Some concern this case. Some concern prior cases where evidence was left out of reports. The defense believes her testimony goes to credibility, intent, and a pattern of omission. The courtroom tightened again. Whitaker turned toward Brenner, but Brenner did not look back. Judge Hart was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I will hear limited testimony. Bring in the witness." The bailiff opened the side door. Clara Whitaker entered without drama. She was in her early 40s, wearing a gray coat buttoned to the collar, her hair pulled back simply, her face pale but composed. She did not look at Daniel first. She looked at the judge, then at the oath card, then at the witness chair as though each step had cost her a year of silence. When she raised her right hand, the courtroom seemed to listen to the air around her. Her voice trembled on the first words of the oath, then steadied. Naomi approached gently, not like an attorney closing a trap, but like someone helping a frightened person cross a narrow bridge. "Mrs. Whitaker, were you previously married to Officer Daniel Whitaker?" "Yes." "For how long?" 17 years. "During that marriage, did Officer Whitaker keep personal copies of arrest-related materials at home?" Clara glanced down. "Yes." A murmur rose and died quickly under Judge Hart's stare. Naomi kept her voice even. "What did he call them?" Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of the witness chair. "He called them lesson files." The words seemed to dim the room. Marcus's mother shut her eyes. Whitaker leaned toward his microphone. "That is not true." Judge Hart's voice cut in immediately. "Officer Whitaker, you will remain silent unless addressed." Naomi waited until the room settled. "Why did he call them that?" Clara looked toward Daniel then, not with hatred, but with the exhausted sadness of someone who had watched a person become smaller inside his own power. "Because he said some people only understood consequences when they were taught publicly." Naomi did not rush. The truth needed space to stand up. "Mrs. Whitaker, did you bring any of those materials today?" Clara nodded. From her coat pocket, she removed a small padded envelope and handed it to the bailiff. "A USB drive and copies of file labels. I gave duplicates to Ms. Brooks yesterday." Brenner rose again. "Your Honor, the state renews its objection." Judge Hart looked at him coldly. "Mr. Brenner, if these materials concern evidence withheld from the state, your objection is noted, but I am more concerned with why the court is learning about them from the defense." Brenner sat slowly. Naomi turned back to Clara. "Is there a file related to Marcus Reed?" "Yes." "What did it contain?" Clara swallowed. "A copy of a dash camera clip. A note in Daniel's handwriting saying, 'Phone visible, keep report clean.'" The words landed harder than any shout could have. Marcus stared at the table. His mother made a small broken sound, quickly covered by her hand. Whitaker's face had gone rigid, but his eyes were moving now, searching for exits that were not there. Naomi's pulse beat once in her throat. She forced herself to continue. "Mrs. Whitaker, you also mentioned prior files. Did one of them carry the name Isaiah Brooks?" Clara looked up, and in her eyes Naomi saw the answer before she spoke. "Yes." The courtroom blurred at its edges. The judge, the jury, the flag, the seal above the bench all seemed to recede, leaving only that name, her father's name, spoken in a room that had once ignored him. Naomi's hand lowered to the table to steady herself. Clara's voice softened. "It was older. From 18 years ago. There was a patrol transfer note, a gas station camera reference, and a copy of a statement that never appeared in the official file." Naomi could feel Marcus looking at her, but she could not look back yet. She could see her father's smile behind prison glass, his palm raised, his voice telling her not to let bitterness raise her. Judge Hart leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitaker, are you saying Officer Whitaker possessed unofficial materials connected to a wrongful conviction?" Clara breathed in, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. And I should have said something years ago." For the first time, she turned fully toward Daniel. "But I am saying it now." The courtroom sat motionless. The badge on Whitaker's chest still shone, but it no longer looked like armor. It looked like evidence. Judge Hart did not speak right away. She looked at Clara Whitaker, then at Naomi Brooks, then at the USB drive resting in the bailiff's gloved hand, as if it were heavier than metal. The courtroom had become so quiet that the soft buzz of the ceiling lights seemed almost disrespectful. Officer Daniel Whitaker sat frozen in the witness chair, his hands folded too tightly, his badge still bright against his chest. Naomi could feel the room waiting for her to celebrate, to strike, to let years of grief turn into a public wound. But she did not move like a woman seeking revenge. She moved like a lawyer carrying names that had been left outside the door for too long. Your Honor, Naomi said, her voice steady. The defense requests immediate admission of the dash camera clip related to Marcus Reed for the limited purpose of impeachment, and we request that all materials concerning prior cases be sealed and referred for independent review. Judge Hart's eyes held hers for a moment. There was something solemn in the judge's face now, not pity, not softness, but recognition. Granted as to the Reed clip, she said. The remaining materials will be placed under seal pending further order of this court. The bailiff connected the drive. The screen flickered once, then opened to a folder with plain file names. No music, no dramatic title, just dates, case numbers, and the cold efficiency of hidden things. Naomi selected the clip marked Reed traffic stop. The video began from inside Whitaker's patrol car. Rain misted the windshield. The dashboard clock read 9:16 p.m. Through the glass, Marcus stood beside his vehicle with both hands visible. His voice came through faintly, careful and controlled. Officer, I am calling emergency services because I want this documented. Whitaker's voice answered from off-camera, impatient and low. Put the phone down. Marcus said, I will put it on the curb. My hands are up. The dash camera showed exactly that. He bent slowly, placed the phone near the curb, and raised both hands again. Naomi paused the video. No one in the jury box looked away. Marcus covered his face with both hands, not hiding from shame, but from the shock of seeing his own fear finally believed by strangers. His mother leaned forward, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Naomi pressed play again. The clip continued. There was no sudden threat, no movement that matched the report, no moment that justified the story Whitaker had written. Instead, the video showed an officer stepping between the camera and the young man, blocking the clearest angle for several seconds. Then came Whitaker's voice, closer to the microphone now. Nobody is going to take your word over mine. Naomi stopped the clip. The sentence stayed in the room long after the sound ended. Assistant State Attorney Brenner stood slowly, but he had no objection left that would not sound like an admission. Judge Hart removed her glasses and placed them on the bench with care. Mr. Brenner, she said, does the state wish to proceed on the current charge against Mr. Reed? Brenner looked at Marcus, then at the screen, then at Whitaker. His face had gone pale around the mouth. No, Your Honor, he said quietly. In light of the evidence presented, the state moves to dismiss. Marcus did not react at first. The word seemed too large to enter him all at once. His mother understood before he did. She let out a breath that broke into a sob and reached for his shoulders. The clerk typed. The keys sounded like small doors unlocking. Judge Hart looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Reed, the charge against you is dismissed. You are free to go. Marcus lowered his hands from his face. His eyes found Naomi's. There was gratitude there, but also exhaustion, the kind that comes when a person is pulled back from an edge no one else could see. Naomi gave him the smallest nod. Not triumph. Not performance. Just I see you. Then Judge Hart turned toward the witness chair, and the warmth left the room again. Officer Whitaker, based on testimony and evidence presented in this court, I am referring this matter to the State Attorney's Integrity Unit and ordering that you remain available for further proceedings. Bailiff, please secure Officer Whitaker's service weapon and badge in accordance with courthouse protocol. Whitaker's hand moved instinctively toward his chest, then stopped. The bailiff approached with quiet professionalism. No one shouted. No one rushed. The officer unclipped the badge himself, but his fingers struggled with the pin. For 21 years, that metal had opened doors, ended questions, and made rooms lean in his favor. Now it rested in his palm, cold and ordinary. He placed it on the evidence table. The sound was small, barely more than a tap, yet everyone heard it. Naomi looked at the badge, then at the man behind it. He would not meet her eyes. She could have given him a sentence sharp enough to follow him home. She could have spoken her father's name like an accusation. Instead, she chose the one thing he had denied so many others. She chose restraint. The law was never yours, she said softly. You only borrowed its shadow. Whitaker's face tightened, but he said nothing. Clara lowered her head in the witness chair, crying without sound. Marcus stood beside his mother, uncuffed, uncondemned, breathing like the air had finally returned to him. And Naomi remained still in the center of the courtroom, not because the pain was gone, but because justice had finally learned how to say one word it had owed them for years. Enough. After the badge touched the evidence table, the courtroom did not erupt. There was no applause, no shouted victory, no sudden music to tell anyone what justice was supposed to feel like. There was only the quiet scrape of a chair as Marcus Reed stood beside his mother, and the faint sound of rain sliding down the courthouse windows 30 feet above the floor. Judge Hart dismissed the hearing with a voice that carried both order and weight, and people began to move carefully, as if the room had become sacred in the last few minutes, and nobody wanted to step too loudly through it. Assistant State Attorney Brenner gathered his files without looking at Naomi. Clara Whitaker was escorted out a side door, one hand over her mouth, her gray coat folded close around her as though she were cold. Officer Daniel Whitaker remained near the witness stand for a moment longer, stripped of the two things that had made him look untouchable when he entered, the medal on his chest and the certainty in his eyes. Naomi did not watch him leave. She was looking at Marcus, who had not moved more than a few inches from the defense table. His mother held him with both arms now, not caring who saw her cry, not caring that the reporters in the back were whispering into their phones. Marcus looked younger without fear on his face. Still tired, still shaken, but young in the way he should have been allowed to be from the beginning. He stepped toward Naomi slowly. "Ms. Brooks," he said, and then stopped, because thank you was too small and everything else was too large. Naomi understood. She placed the cracked phone glass back into its evidence sleeve and closed the folder with gentle hands. "Go home with your mother," she said. "Eat something warm. Sleep with your phone turned off. Let today be over for a few hours." Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on her. "What about your father?" The question reached her softly, almost carefully, as if he were afraid it might break something. Naomi looked toward the sealed box on the clerk's desk, the one that now held the USB drive, the file labels, and the first real doorway back into Isaiah Brooks's case. For 18 years, her father's name had lived inside her like a room without windows. Today, someone had opened one. Not enough to bring him back. Enough to let air in. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow we start with him." Marcus's mother took Naomi's hands in both of hers. Her palms were warm and trembling. "Your father would be proud of you," she whispered. Naomi's throat tightened, but she did not look away. "He taught me not to hate the truth just because it arrives late." The older woman squeezed her hands once, then led her son toward the aisle. Naomi watched them pass through the heavy courtroom doors, mother and son walking into the hallway together, free in a way that was ordinary to some people and miraculous to others. When the room emptied, Naomi stayed behind. The bailiff gave her a respectful nod and let her gather her things without hurry. The high windows had turned silver with afternoon light. The American flag stood still beside the bench. On the evidence table, a faint square of dust marked the place where Whitaker's badge had rested before being sealed away. Naomi touched the edge of that empty space with 2 fingers, not in anger, not in triumph, but in farewell to the fear that men like him believed they could pass down forever. Later, after the clerk allowed her into the records room, Naomi sat alone beneath a humming fluorescent light with 2 folders open before her. One read Marcus Reed. The other read Isaiah Brooks. The paper smelled old, dry, and official. Outside, traffic moved along the wet Chicago streets. Somewhere below, a siren passed and faded into the distance. Naomi placed Marcus's dismissal order beside her father's old case file. One man had been saved in time. One man had been returned to the truth too late. She let her hand rest between the 2 names, feeling the distance and the connection, the grief and the grace. Then she removed a photograph from her wallet, worn soft at the corners. Isaiah Brooks in front of his repair shop, smiling with a wrench in one hand and sunlight on his face. Naomi set the photograph on top of the file. For a long moment, she said nothing. The room did not need words. The light through the narrow window fell across the papers, across the photograph, across Naomi's still hands. And in that quiet, justice did not sound like thunder. It sounded like breath finally returning to a name.